Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Playing with Power MTG, where we play with the most powerful cards in the most powerful formats. Tonight's game is brought to you by TCGplayer.com, where you can find all of your cards online while still supporting local game stores. Dragon Shield for all of the best accessories to protect your decks, and through Patreon, where you get awesome benefits for your direct support. For tonight's game, we are playing CEDH with one of our returning Mox Pearl tier patrons, Rio. If you have ever wanted to be on an episode, consider signing up for a Mox Pearl tier. You get all kinds of Patreon benefits, and you get to be in a video with us. So, let's start out by showcasing our fighters this evening. First, we have Adam piloting the partner pair of Krark the Thumbless and Sakashima of 1,000 Faces. This is a mid-range deck that looks to break Krark's ability for massive payoffs. Adam's opening hand contains a Lightning Bolt, Blazing Volley, Polluted Delta, Bloodstained Mire, Arid Mesa, Mountain, and an Island. Next, we have FOLGER playing Kenrith, the Return King. This is a proactive deck that tries to resolve a Hermit Druid activation as early as turn 2. FOLGER's opening hand contains Brainstorm, Swan Song, Carpet of Flowers, Hermit Druid, Finehorn Elves, and a Watery Grave. His London Mulligan is a Shallow Grave. After that, we have Rio piloting Grand Arbiter Augustine IV. At first glance, this would look like a stacks deck, but it's actually not. This is a mill deck, utilizing the commander's cost reduction ability to put out multiple Persistent Petitioners. His opening hand contains a Smothering Tithe, Cavern of Souls, Mesmeric Orb, Persistent Petitioners, Mana Confluence, Rally the Ancestors, and a Thassa's Oracle. Finally, we have ZACK piloting the partner pair of Tymna the Weaver and Tana the Bloodsower. This is a stacks deck commonly referred to as Blood Pod. Once your opponents are stopped with your stacks and hate bears, it assembles a Kiki combo with either Yisan, Survival of the Fittest, or its namesake, Birthing Pod. His opening hand contains a Rest in Peace, Nurturing Peatland, Vampiric Tutor, Avacyn's Pilgrim, Overgrown Tomb, Wild Growth, and a Plains. Without further ado, let's kick off this king-size killer kind klutzy naughty knockout. FOLGER wins the Magic Lore Jeopardy and gets to start us off. FOLGER draws a card for turn, and then plays a Watery Grave into play untapped, paying 2 life. He passes the turn. Adam draws for turn and plays an Arid Mesa. He ends his turn. Rio draws for turn and then plays a Cavern of Souls, naming wizards as it enters. He casts a Mana Vault. Rio follows it up by casting a Mesmeric Orb. Rio ships the turn to ZACK. ZACK draws for turn and plays an Overgrown Tomb into play untapped, paying 2 life. He casts Avacyn's Pilgrim. ZACK passes. During ZACK's end step, FOLGER casts a Brainstorm. In response, Adam cracks his Arid Mesa, loses a life, and fetches up a Steam Vents onto the battlefield tapped. FOLGER then draws 3, doesn't find a second land drop, and then puts 2 cards back on top of his library. The turn then passes to FOLGER. During his upkeep, Mesmeric Orb triggers and FOLGER mills 1 card. He draws and passes. During his upkeep, Adam mills 1 card through Mesmeric Orb. Adam draws and plays an Island. He ends his turn. During his upkeep, Rio mills 1 card through Mesmeric Orb. During his draw step, he takes 1 damage from his Mana Vault. Rio plays an Island. He casts a Persistent Petitioner. Rio passes to ZACK. During his upkeep, ZACK mills 1 through Mesmeric Orb. He draws and casts a Carpet of Flowers. ZACK moves to a second main phase and adds 2 green through his Carpet. He plays a Nurturing Peatland. ZACK casts Wild Growth, targeting his Peatland. He taps Nurturing Peatland to cast his commander, Tymna the Weaver. ZACK passes. FOLGER draws, still doesn't hit what he wants, and passes, discarding to hand size. Adam draws and plays a Polluted Delta. He cracks it, loses a life, and fetches up an Island onto the battlefield. Adam casts Magus of the Moon, to the chagrin of FOLGER. He passes to Rio. During his upkeep, Rio mills 2 through Mesmeric Orb. During his draw step, he takes a damage from his Mana Vault. Rio plays an Island and ships the turn to ZACK. During his upkeep, ZACK mills 3 through Mesmeric Orb. He draws and moves the combat. ZACK attacks FOLGER with Avacyn's Pilgrim and Adam with Tymna. Neither block and both take the damage. ZACK gains 2 from Tymna, and in his second main phase, Tymna and Carpet of Flowers trigger. ZACK pays 2 life and draws 2 cards and then adds 2 green mana. He casts up Bloom Tender. ZACK plays a Swamp and then passes to FOLGER. During ZACK's end step, FOLGER taps his Watery Grave in an attempt to dig further, utilizing the mill from Mesmeric Orb. During his upkeep, FOLGER mills 1 through Mesmeric Orb. He draws, takes no actions, and passes the turn, discarding to hand size. During his upkeep, Mesmeric Orb triggers and Adam mills 3 cards. He draws and plays a Mountain. Adam casts a Blazing Volley, attempting to kill ZACK's Mana Dorks. It deals 1 damage to all of his opponent's creatures, and he follows it up by casting his commander, Krark the Thumbless. Adam moves to combat and attacks FOLGER with Magus of the Moon. FOLGER takes it, and then Adam passes the turn. During Adam's end step, Rio activates his Persistent Petitioner to mill himself for 1. During his upkeep, Rio mills 2 through Mesmeric Orb. During his draw step, he takes a damage from his mana vault. Rio plays a Plains and then casts his commander, Grand Arbiter Augustine IV. He ends his turn. During his upkeep, ZACK mills 1 through Mesmeric Orb. He draws and moves to combat. He attacks FOLGER with Tymna, who doesn't block, takes the damage, and then ZACK gains 2 life. In his second main phase, Tymna and Carpet trigger. ZACK pays 1 life, draws 1 card, and then adds 2 red mana. He plays a Plains, and then casts his other commander, Tana the Bloodsower. ZACK casts a Deafening Silence. He passes. During ZACK's end step, FOLGER taps his Watery Grave again. During his upkeep, FOLGER mills 1 through Mesmeric Orb. FOLGER draws, continues to struggle, and passes, discarding to hand size. During his upkeep, Adam mills 4 through Mesmeric Orb. He draws and plays a Bloodstained Mire. Adam casts his other commander, Sakashima of 1,000 Faces. It enters as a copy of Krark the Thumbless. Adam ends his turn. During his upkeep, Rio mills 4 through Mesmeric Orb. During his draw step, he takes a damage from his mana vault. Rio plays a Mana Confluence. He casts a Smothering Tithe. Rio moves to combat and attacks ZACK with Grand Arbiter. ZACK takes it, and Rio ends the turn. During his upkeep, ZACK mills 5 through Mesmeric Orb. ZACK draws and pays for Smothering Tithe. He plays a Windswept Teeth and then moves to combat. ZACK continues to add insult to injury by attacking FOLGER with Tymna and Tana. FOLGER takes it, ZACK gains 2, and then Tana creates 2 Saprolings. In his second main phase, Tymna and Carpet trigger. In response, ZACK casts Vampiric Tutor. He fetches up a card onto the top of his library and then loses 2 life. With the Tymna trigger still on the stack, Rio responds by activating Persistent Petitioner to mill ZACK for 1. ZACK then pays 1 life and draws 1 card from Tymna, paying for Smothering Tithe. Annoyed at himself for forgetting about the Petitioner, he passes. During ZACK's end step, FOLGER taps Watery Grave. During his upkeep, FOLGER mills 1 through Mesmeric Orb. FOLGER draws, can't pay for Smothering Tithe, and Rio creates a treasure. FOLGER finally plays Command Tower as his second land for the entire game. He celebrates not discarding the hand size, and then ends the turn. During his upkeep, Adam mills 5 through Mesmeric Orb. He draws, and Smothering Tithe triggers, and then Rio creates a treasure. Adam casts Krark's Thumb. He passes. During his upkeep, Rio mills 6 through Mesmeric Orb. During his draw step, he takes a damage from his mana vault. Rio plays a Scalding Tarn. He moves to combat and attacks ZACK with Grand Arbiter. ZACK takes a hit, and then Rio passes to ZACK. During his upkeep, ZACK mills 7 through Mesmeric Orb. He draws and pays for Smothering Tithe. ZACK adds 2 white mana through his Carpet. He plays a Verdant Catacombs. ZACK casts Karmic Guide. The table looks at his graveyard and knows that he will either resurrect Goblin Sharpshooter or Elesh Norn. ZACK tanks hard, thinking about his target. If he grabs Elesh Norn, FOLGER is no longer held back by the Magus of the Moon. However, if he grabs Sharpshooter, the table will know he's pretty much attempting to combo kill them and will respond accordingly. So, what should ZACK choose? Let us know which creature you would pick in this situation in the comments below. ZACK decides to target Elesh Norn. In response, Adam casts Lightning Bolt, targeting Tymna. Krark and Sakashima trigger, and despite flipping an extra coin from Krark's thumb, Adam miraculously loses all 4 flips and returns the Lightning Bolt to his hand. Then Karmic Guide returns Elesh Norn from ZACK's graveyard to the battlefield. He feels safe knowing FOLGER only has 2 lands and hasn't really participated in the game thus far. ZACK moves to combat and attacks Adam with Tymna, Tana, and 2 Saproling tokens. Adam takes a hit, ZACK gains 4, and Tana creates 4 more Saprolings. In his second main phase, ZACK triggers Tymna, paying a life and drawing a card. Smothering Tithe triggers, and Rio creates a treasure token. ZACK ends his turn. During ZACK's end step, FOLGER taps Watery Grave and Command Tower. During his upkeep, FOLGER mills 2 through Mesmeric Orb. He draws and plays an Underground River. He casts Carpet of Flowers. FOLGER moves to his second main phase and adds 3 red. He casts Dockside Extortionist. ZACK, possibly regretting his decision, pleads with Rio to crack his treasures. In response, with FOLGER arguing against it, Rio cracks 4. Dockside enters the battlefield, creates 7 treasures, and FOLGER reminds the table that it dies as a state-based action due to Elesh Norn. The table collectively realizes the bullet that they dodged, because FOLGER would have been able to use ZACK's own Elesh Norn to produce infinite mana with Dockside and Kenrith. With Dockside creating 7 treasures and dying to Elesh Norn, FOLGER could have activated Kenrith's Reanimate ability for 5 to create infinite treasures. FOLGER then casts his commander, Kenrith the Return King. A little dismayed at this spicy play was stopped, but happy to be included in the game, FOLGER passes. During his upkeep, Adam mills 5 through Mesmeric Orb. Adam draws and pays for Smothering Tithe. He ends his turn. During Adam's end step, Rio cracks a Scalding Tarn, loses a life, and then fetches up a hallowed fountain onto the battlefield tapped. During its upkeep, Rio mills 2 through Mesmeric Orb. He taps Mana Confluence to help untap Mana Vault. Mesmeric Orb triggers again and Rio mills 1. Rio draws and then passes to ZACK. During ZACK's upkeep, Karmic Guide and Mesmeric Orb trigger. He responds by cracking Verdant Catacombs, loses a life, and then fetches up Badlands onto the battlefield. ZACK then cracks Windswept Heath, loses a life, and fetches up a Plateau onto the battlefield. ZACK mills 9 through Mesmeric Orb, and then taps Nurturing Peatland to pay the echo cost of Karmic Guide. He draws, and then Smothering Tithe triggers, and Rio creates a treasure. ZACK adds 3 red mana from his carpet. He plays a forest, and then casts Splinter Twin, targeting his Karmic Guide. In response, FOLGER casts Swan Song, countering the Splinter Twin. ZACK creates a bird. He moves to combat, and then attacks FOLGER with everything, killing him. Tana creates 4 Saproling creature tokens. ZACK ends his turn. During his end step, Adam cracks his Bloodstained Mire, loses a life, and fetches up a volcanic island onto the battlefield. During his upkeep, Adam mills 2 through Mesmeric Orb. He draws and pays for Smothering Tithe. He does nothing else and passes. During his end step, Rio activates a Persistent Petitioner to mill ZACK for 1. During his upkeep, Rio mills 6 through Mesmeric Orb. He draws and casts another Persistent Petitioner. Rio passes to ZACK. During his upkeep, ZACK mills 14 cards through Mesmeric Orb. He draws and then taps Nurturing Peatland to pay for Smothering Tithe. ZACK moves to combat. In response, Rio casts Turnabout, tapping down all of ZACK's creatures. ZACK moves to a second main phase and adds 4 black from his Carpet of Flowers. He casts Assassin's Trophy, destroying Mesmeric Orb. Rio fetches up a Plains onto the battlefield untapped. ZACK ends his turn. During ZACK's end step, Adam casts Impulse. In response, ZACK casts Opposition Agent. Agent resolves, and then Adam looks at the top 4, puts a card into his hand, and the rest on bottom. Then the turn passes to Adam. Adam draws for turn, and then Smothering Tithe triggers. Rio creates a treasure. Adam pays 2 life and casts a Gitaxian Probe, targeting Rio. He looks at Rio's hand and draws a card. Smothering Tithe triggers, and Rio creates another treasure. Adam passes. During his end step, Rio activates 2 Persistent Petitioners, milling ZACK for 2. Adam then discards to hand size. Rio draws and then casts Thassa's Oracle. It resolves, and he looks at the top 5, chooses 1, puts it on top of his library, and then bottoms the rest. Rio ships the turn to ZACK. ZACK draws and pays for Smothering Tithe. He moves to combat and attacks Rio with everything. In response, Adam casts Cyclonic Rift, bouncing Elesh Norn to ZACK's hand. Before blockers are declared, Rio casts Rally the Ancestors, where X equals 3. He returns an Aven Mind Sensor and 6 Persistent Petitioners from the graveyard to the battlefield. He blocks 9 Saprolings with his Persistent Petitioners, and then Thassa's Oracle and Tana with Grand Arbiter. 9 Saprolings and Tana die, and Rio takes the rest. In a second main phase, ZACK adds 4 white through his carpet. ZACK recasts Elesh Norn. In response, Rio taps 4 Advisors to mill ZACK for 12. He then taps another 4 to mill another 12 from ZACK, dwindling his library. Elesh Norn resolves, and Rio loses all of his creatures. ZACK casts a Soul Ring. He ends the turn. Adam draws, and Smothering Tithe triggers. Rio creates a treasure. Adam casts Underworld Breach. He casts Gilded Drake from his graveyard, paying the escape cost. Gilded Drake enters and exchanges control with Elesh Norn. ZACK loses all of his creatures, and Adam passes, sacrificing Underworld Breach at his end step. Rio draws and casts Aristic Study. He recasts his commander, Grand Arbiter Augustine IV. Rio passes to ZACK. At the end of Rio's turn, ZACK taps Nurturing Peatland to cast Noxious Revival, returning Assassin's Trophy from the graveyard to the top of his library. ZACK draws and pays for Smothering Tithe. He adds 4 red mana from his Carpet of Flowers. ZACK casts Assassin's Trophy, destroying Elesh Norn. Adam fetches up an island onto the battlefield. ZACK follows it up by recasting his commander, Tana the Bloodsower. He moves to combat and attacks Rio with Gilded Drake. Rio takes it, and ZACK ends the turn. Adam draws, and Smothering Tithe triggers. Rio creates a treasure. He does nothing else, and ships the turn to Rio. Rio draws, and then casts Dawn from his graveyard for its Aftermath cost. He returns 8 Persistent Petitioners and Thassa's Oracle to his hand. Rio casts a Mentor of the Meek. He casts a Persistent Petitioner, paying for the Mentor trigger, and drawing a card. Rio plays an island, and then casts another Persistent Petitioner, tapping Mana Confluence to pay for the Mentor trigger, and then drawing another card. He sacrifices a treasure to cast a Persistent Petitioner, sacrificing another treasure to pay for the Mentor trigger, and then draws another card. Rio passes, discarding to hand size. ZACK draws and pays for Smothering Tithe. He moves to combat and attacks Rio with Gilded Drake and Adam with Tana. Tana triggers, and ZACK creates 2 Saprolings. In his second main phase, he adds 5 mana from his Carpet of Flowers. ZACK recasts his commander, Tymna the Weaver. He ends the turn. At the end of ZACK's turn, Adam casts Lightning Bolt, targeting Grand Arbiter, paying for Rhystic Study. In response, Rio casts Mental Misstep, countering Lightning Bolt. Adam draws, and Smothering Tide triggers. Rio creates a treasure. Adam casts Mana Crypt. He passes to Rio. At the end of Adam's turn, Rio taps 4 advisors to mill ZACK for the remaining 6 cards of his library. Rio draws, and then takes the damage from his mana vault. He plays an island. He casts Persistent Petitioner, triggering Mentor of the Meek. In response, Adam flushes in Hull Breacher, paying for Rhystic Study. Rio then declines to pay for the Mentor trigger. He then casts 4 more Persistent Petitioners, declining the Mentor trigger each time. Rio ships the turn to ZACK. ZACK attempts to draw from his empty library and loses the game. During his upkeep, Adam loses his Mana Crypt trigger and takes 3 damage. He draws, and Smothering Tithe triggers. Rio creates a treasure. Adam casts Phyrexian Metamorph. It resolves and enters as a copy of Grand Arbiter. He follows it up by casting Spark Double. It resolves and enters as a non-legendary copy of Grand Arbiter as well, with a 1/1 counter on it. Adam passes. During Adam's end step, Rio taps 4 advisors to mill Adam for 12. Rio taps another 4 advisors to mill Adam for an additional 12. During his upkeep, Rio pays to untap his mana vault. He draws and plays a Cephalid Colosseum. Rio taps 4 advisors to mill 12 cards from Adam's library. Rio repeats this process, milling Adam for another 12. He taps 1 Persistent Petitioner to mill Adam for 1. Rio sacrifices Cephalid Colosseum, targeting Adam. Adam draws 3 and discards 3. Rio then passes to Adam. Adam attempts to draw from an empty library and loses the game. Ladies and gentlemen, what a game. Congratulations to Rio on his hard-fought win. He was able to slow the game down with his interaction and stacks and eventually mill his opponents out for the win. The most valuable card goes to Rally the Ancestors. This card was played at the perfect time and allowed Rio to mill ZACK for 24. It also returned enough petitioners to block ZACK's attack to prevent a potentially lethal hit. This was the key to Rio's victory and allowed him enough time to recover, rebuild, and win the game. If you liked this video and wanted to help out, please give us a like and consider subscribing and ringing the bell to be notified of new videos as they come out. This episode was made possible thanks to Patreon. Do you want to be on an episode of Playing with Power? Rio played with us today as part of our Mox Pearl tier. This tier allows you to play on an episode just like Rio did today. There are all kinds of extra benefits as well, so sign up to our Patreon and start getting benefits right away. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time. Okay, I wanted to give a Patreon shout out to Tyler Hancox, Snarps the Cleft, I think that's right, RJ Johnson, Matt Wingrove, Delph Driz, Brandon Harper, Marcus Toomey, Dustin Maye, Josh Kovach? Maybe. Baby Jeebus, Mox Rob, Trey Payne, Rakeko, Baskin, Zods, Noah Saldana, Wayan, Spilrahu, Road Grode Medflode, CZ, and Nick. Thanks again, everyone. Really appreciate it.